Thank you for attending. My name is Jess Eakens, and I am a construction stormwater inspector for the Department of Ecology. And I work out of the Southwest Regional Office, and I will be presenting our inspection process improvement project using ArcGIS Survey123 with Morgan Maupin today.
Thank you, Jess. So I'm Morgan Maupin. I'm also a construction stormwater inspector out of Ecology's Southwest Regional Office. And together, Jess and I help regulate the Construction Stormwater General Permit for the Department of Ecology. So the Construction Stormwater General Permit, in general, it's issued to construction sites that are 1 acre or larger and discharge stormwater to waters of the state. Occasionally, we require sites that are smaller than 1 acre to get the permit. And sometimes sites that are larger don't have to get the permit, but generally it's that 1 acre size threshold. So if you have this permit, permittees are required to first develop, implement, and update a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or a SWIP, which covers the 13 elements of a construction site, which is also covered in the Municipal Stormwater Permit. They're required to have a certified erosion and sediment control lead, or a CESL, conduct weekly site inspections. And then they're also required to sample stormwater discharges weekly, and they have to sample for turbidity and sometimes pH, depending on the project, and then submit those sampling results as discharge monitoring reports to Ecology. So there is definitely some overlap with the municipal stormwater permits. First of all, minimum requirement number 2 for new and redevelopment in Appendix 1 of the municipal stormwater permits. That's the main overlap. The Construction Stormwater General Permit doesn't really cover the minimum requirements 1 or 3 through 9. It's just that number 2. So we don't do site plan review prior to issuing the permit. We don't have requirements for post-construction BMPs or anything like that. We're really just concerned with construction stormwater management during the construction phase of projects. There are size threshold differences. So like I mentioned, our threshold is generally 1 acre of ground disturbance, whereas municipalities are required to enforce these rules on much smaller sites. And then the IDDE programs obviously overlap because we do have illicit discharges from construction sites pretty often. So I'm going to go over some of the challenges that we've had with the Construction Stormwater General Permit, and these challenges are what actually led to this process improvement in the first place. So the first is generally just slow report writing. So on the left is just kind of a typical screenshot of a typical inspection report. So the basic information like the permittee's name and the address, latitude and longitude, stuff like that was needing to be entered every single time someone does an inspection and entered manually into this report. And then reports are typically written in a narrative format. So, the inspector, it was kind of up to them to just transcribe their notes into this inspection report. And that would usually result in a 1 to 2 page kind of essay, which, as you can imagine, is not something that most contractors really want to read. And then report delivery was taking usually about a week up to a month or longer. At construction sites, which change really quickly, daily usually, that's really a long time to be getting our inspection reports. So that was a huge improvement we wanted to make. Second challenge is just generally there's a ton of permits out there, active construction sites, and very few inspectors here at Ecology. So on the right, you're seeing a map showing just Pierce County, which Jess covers Pierce County as well as Jefferson County. So this isn't even all of her coverage area. Those are active and draft permits, so some of those haven't started yet. But generally, depending on the time of the year, where we're at in construction, each of us inspectors will have between 250 up to 415 permits, which is obviously a lot for one inspector. And prior to this app rollout, we were seeing inspectors complete roughly 6 to 10 inspections per month. And what that resulted in is only about 25% of permitted construction projects ever got inspected by an ecology inspector, which obviously is a pretty low number. And as time goes on, we're seeing more and more permits get pulled every year and really the same number of staff. So this issue is just getting worse. Another challenge are database inefficiencies. So inspection reports are typically written in a Word document. They're exported to a PDF format and then uploaded to our internal database. So if you wanted to get the compliance history of a single site, that's simple enough. You just go to that site in the database and look at all of the previous inspection reports. But we weren't really collecting compliance data statewide, so we couldn't answer questions like how many of each type of violation have occurred in the last year, or do particular permittees have more violations than others? So that's a challenge for permit management when we're reissuing the permit and things like that. And a further complication or challenge is that photos had to be uploaded to a whole separate database. So once we were done uploading inspection reports to our regular internal database, a separate one to upload photos to, which is really just a extra workload for inspectors back at the office. And with that, I'm going to let Jess take over.
All right, so the tool that we chose to use to address the challenges that Morgan talked about is ArcGIS Survey123. And Survey123 is essentially a 3-step system. So 1, asking questions, actually creating your survey and sharing it with users. 2, getting answers, so your users actually going out into the field, collecting data, and Survey123 stores that data for you. And then 3, actually using that data to inform and make decisions, and in our case, actually generate the inspection reports that we send out to permittees. So 1, creating and sharing. You can create pretty simple surveys just with Survey123 online, and then a little bit more complex surveys with a desktop tool called Survey123 Connect. And with Survey123 Connect, you are essentially using an Excel sheet like you see here on the left. And these 4 tabs here, your survey is where your questions are entered. So establishing a construction access, and then choices here is where you would put your populated options. So these permit references that are populated when you select no. Settings controls your form name and some of the appearance options, and then types actually gives you instructions on how to enter this information into the Excel sheet itself. And then users can share the survey with your whole organization, groups within your organization, or just everyone, the general public. And you can actually even control submission settings. So how many times a user can submit a survey, times of day, things like that. And then capturing data, so actually going out into the field, submitting those surveys, and then you can actually view that data when you get back on Survey123 online. So here's a screenshot where I have filtered for the year of 2019, and for the 820 surveys that were submitted, 45 were not submitting discharge monitoring reports, as well as did not have an established construction access. And we can filter this data by violation type, water body, CECL trainer, and even the contractor, and then actually use that data to inform future permit reissuance decisions, really determine where we need to focus our technical assistance and where we can make improvements in the CECL training programs. And generating reports. So Survey123 has a feature report service, which means you can upload a template like this into Survey123 online. And then each time a user submits a survey, an inspection report like this is generated and emailed to them. And this has all of the actual information that you put into the survey populated into the inspection report for you. Some really cool functions we've embedded in our survey. This is what the survey would look like when you open it up on your phone, page 1, page 2. And one of the coolest features for us is that you can actually pull Paris data, so our internal water quality database data, while you're out in the field just by typing in a permit number. You can even find a link to the actual permit Paris webpage, and there are even links to Google and Apple Maps to get you to the site. This is really useful when you're bouncing around from site to site out in the field. There are even links to precipitation data, which is really nice for stormwater. And then the survey even walks users through the inspection with exact permit language here. So New inspectors can find this really useful, just kind of guiding them through the inspection, and seasoned inspectors too, just to have that permit language there for the permittee rather than having to carry around a 55-page paper document in the rain. And then there is a calculate area function as well, which with our 1 acre threshold is really nice when you're out in the field. You can map out an area and actually determine whether or not coverage is needed for that project. And I will let Morgan go back to some of the outcomes we've seen since using the app.
Yeah, so we categorize the outcomes into 4 general categories. I'm going to talk about each individually, but first they are improved timeliness and efficiency of both report writing and delivery, improved consistency and technical assistance, so really just the overall quality of the reports that we're sending out. The app allows for data-driven inspections and permit management, like we discussed, and as well as improved photo management. So first, timeliness and efficiency. Like we saw earlier, the basic information is entered automatically when you type in the permit number, so you don't have to write down the permittee's name or their address, latitude, longitude, things like that. And then the vast majority of the information that you collect during inspection, you actually enter on site. So less note-taking and transcribing later. For example, individual violations, you click them and then they're auto-populated in the report later. And what this has resulted in is really just more time inspecting, more time in the field doing what we're actually trained to do. So we've gotten the report delivery time down to 1 day to 1 week. So if there's a site that has some really dire issues and we really want to get the inspection report delivered as soon as we can get it out the same day pretty easily. And since rolling out the app, inspectors have been completing roughly 20 to 30 inspections per month. And that number used to be about 6 to 10. Obviously, with fieldwork being shut down for a few months because of the pandemic, this number is kind of a rough estimation. We've had weeks or months that are actually doing quite a bit more inspections than that, and some doing less, but that's kind of the general average that we've been seeing. So for consistency and technical assistance, like Jess mentioned, the survey works as an inspection guide. So it's really hard to miss things if you're a new inspector or if you're a seasoned inspector. Again, you're having an off day or you just can't remember that exact permit requirement. You can look it up really easily while filling out the survey. So what you see here is a screenshot of what the survey looks like on your phone while you're using it. So in this example, we clicked no for establishing a construction access, and then more details automatically pop up. So in this case, they didn't stabilize their access point and their sediment tract onto the road. So you click those 2 specifics. And then in the report that gets generated, in the left column, you can see those violations with exact permit language. In the center column, a compliance timeline is auto-populated. So different violations in this permit have different timelines, 7 days or 10 days in this example. Again, that's auto-populated. You don't have to type that out or anything. And then in the right column, there are hyperlinks to the appropriate stormwater management manual. So either the Western Washington or the Eastern Washington Stormwater Management Manual. So in this case, because we have construction access violations, hyperlinks directly to the stabilized construction access BMP or the street sweeping BMP, which makes it very clear to the permittee or the contractor what it is that we're asking in order to get in compliance with the permit. Next, data-driven inspections. So this is Survey123 is an Esri ArcGIS product, and so it integrates really well with ArcGIS maps. So what you see on the right is a screenshot of a map that you can see, you can use in the office or when you're out in the field using the ArcGIS Explorer app. So in this case, the yellow dots are active or draft permits in the Olympia area. And then the blue dots are surveys that have been submitted by one of our inspectors. So say I'm out in the field and I have a little more time than I expected to have and I want to go do another inspection. I can actually look up all the prior inspections on a specific site while I'm in the field before heading out there. So I can see individual violations and everything that inspector recorded. And then maybe more importantly is that we have this granular compliance data now. So again, all these violations are recorded in the Survey123 database. And so like Jess showed earlier, we can look those up when we're thinking about permit reissuance and things like that. And then lastly, this app has been a huge improvement on our photo retention requirements. So whether you take photos through the app, there is a function where you just click the camera button and take photos through the survey app, or you can just take them on your phone through the camera app and then upload them into the survey. Once you submit a survey, those photos are stored in the Survey123 online database. All their metadata is preserved. So there's really no extra workload for the inspector having to save all these photos and upload them to a separate database. So it's a huge time saver for inspectors, which again just means more time in the field, less time in the office, generating reports and doing that type of stuff. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jess.
Right, so some other really nice things we found with Survey123 is that it's really adaptable to other general permits. So we're using it for the Construction Stormwater General Permit, but it can also be adapted for the industrial stormwater, sand and gravel, boat yards, and of course the MS4 and other general permits. Morgan and I had the opportunity to cross-train with some of our MS4 permit managers and helped with some MS4 permit audits. And we're actually able to adapt a similar survey to our inspection survey for the MS4 audit, specifically the maintenance and storage yard inspection component of the permit. Another example of this is that we were able to incorporate both the Eastern and the Western Washington stormwater management manuals into the Survey123 app and the reports that we're generating. So implementing the survey statewide, there was initially some inspector reluctance, it being a new tool still under construction and not always reliable. We also found that there was quite a different reaction between management introducing the app versus inspectors introducing it. And that really the best approach was a process improvement team. And this team had managers on it, inspectors from every region, IT staff, as well as the permit writer. And with this group, we were able to identify implementation challenges, as well as an implementation plan matrix. So with implementation, what's next? Photo management is still on the table. So right now, Survey123 stores all of our data on a cloud that Ecology does not own. And Ecology is working on Enterprise GIS, where we'll actually be able to take all of that data, store it on our own servers, and still have all of the same functionality with Survey123. And with that, we're hoping that we can actually integrate all of that compliance data with our internal water quality databases. We are also working on making the reports more accessible to everyone. We are working on training current staff as well as training programs for new staff on how to actually use the app. We also still have regular maintenance of the app. ArcGIS Survey123 has, or ArcGIS often has updates where we need to go in and do some maintenance with the survey, as well as when new permits are updated or issued, we need to go in and update those permit web links. And then of course, as a result of all of this really hard work, we're hoping that we see cleaner water. So conclusions, ArcGIS Survey123 enables non-IT staff to create forms and collect the data that's most useful for their work and enables them to better perform their job. The app is of course not a magic bullet and requires definitely a continued focus on process improvement principles. And lastly, we found that the tool has increased our field time, improved customer service, as well as permittee compliance. And with that, we can answer any questions you guys might have.
Viewers can write questions in the chat box. And I have a question for you. How have the permittees reacted to this new form or inspection?
I think, like I said, we're seeing more compliance just because we're taking out all of that long narrative, and the compliance recommendations and violations usually begin on the first page. So you start seeing those, red red and bold observations. And I think, just being able to get to the meat of it more quickly, rather than having to read essentially an essay, really improve their response to it.
Are you seeing corrective actions being addressed sooner now that you're able to get the inspection forms out, like within a day or a week?
We're seeing them addressed sooner, and we're also seeing that we're not having, though we're going out more and we're writing inspection reports more, we're not seeing an increase in any sort of enforcement actions or anything like that.
How do you decide which job sites to inspect?
We're going to let you go.
That's a good question. It's a really good question because, as you saw, we have a ton of active permits that we need to choose between. There's a variety of options. I like to prioritize bigger sites if I can, because, we have sites that are 1 acre or less, and we have sites that are a couple hundred acres. There's obviously a lot more potential for pollution at those bigger sites. We also use water quality listings. So if a site is near a surface water body that's impaired for turbidity or sediment or pH or something, that's going to be a priority site. Otherwise, since we've been inspecting for almost 2 years now, we kind of know which projects out there are the ones that need the most attention. And then at this point, we're able to get to those new sites that we see pretty quickly. So it's a pretty big combination of things. But personally, I like to go to larger sites that are really close to a water body. And then, of course, there's individual permittees that are going to follow all the rules without being told to, and there's others that are going to need a little bit of inspector kind of pushing.
What kind of fines is Ecology prepared to levy against contractors when you guys find failures or violations of a permit?
Can I add one more thing to the first one before we go into enforcement?
Sure.
Another really cool thing about this is, so prioritizing sites, this is where it's really helpful. So that map that Morgan showed for ArcGIS, we can actually use the data that we have in Survey123 and export it as a shapefile. So even in our survey, you can answer a question about who the contractor was, and there's a question about whether you need to follow up urgently or just follow up or not really in need of any sort of follow up. And you can actually export that onto the map in GIS and change kind of the color of your dots and like which permits you need to go to, and just pull that map up when you're in the field. So that's super cool. It's still something we're kind of working on. And I think as we get more into this, we'll have more like formal GIS training to help us really use that data better. But that's also a super exciting kind of way that we can use this to prioritize our sites. And then I'll let Morgan go after if he has something to add. But as far as enforcement goes, the app, the survey hasn't really changed anything as far as that goes. Again, getting to more sites, and I think being able to provide a lot better technical assistance and a lot more technical assistance has, kind of helped alleviate the need for enforcement. But the way that we handle any sort of enforcement action is still the same.
Have you seen any trends that are time sensitive that you are able to get on? You kind of touched on that during the presentation.
Trends that are time sensitive?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly. We're, again, kind of goes back to prioritizing. So time sensitive, certainly whether or not it's raining and how close it is to water bodies or an inlet that discharges to a water body. But yeah, just kind of goes back to prioritizing it, I suppose.
What kind of setup effort was required to pull Paris data into the app? Is that possible for non-ecology users to do?
Yes, I was able to do that. It is simply through an Excel sheet. I guess if you're not an ecology employee, you wouldn't have access to that, that data to pull into the survey. But if you, for your own organization, you can certainly pull that sort of information into your survey without any sort of like formal IT training. You can find a lot of videos on how to do that kind of stuff online. But yeah, anybody can essentially do that with their survey.
When you have a corrective action for a site, how long do you wait to go back to that site?
I typically wait about 2 weeks, depending on the violation. It's usually they have 10 days to come into compliance with the permit. So I'll typically schedule a follow-up for 2 weeks later. That gives them a few extra days. If they haven't addressed the violation at that point, then we'll kind of escalate our technical assistance and enforcement, so issue a corrections required. But 2 weeks is generally what I do. Different inspectors might have a different way of doing it though.
Is there any opportunity to coordinate with you guys if you're out of the agency? Have you coordinated with any like municipal inspectors or other?
Yeah, that's actually something I was going to mention before logging off, is that, like I mentioned, I kind of forgot to say this when prioritizing sites. If a local inspector calls us and says, hey, I've got this site, they're discharging and I can't seem to get them to do what I'm asking, that'll pretty much go to the top of my list immediately. So absolutely, definitely call us. Our contact information right here, email or call or submit NERTs. And I'm always happy to meet with inspectors and do a joint inspection.
Any idea when the industrial stormwater inspectors will get to use an app like this?
No, I think it's going to depend on that team that Jess is a part of, rolling out the app statewide for construction inspectors first and really seeing how that goes. Jess, you might know more about it than I do, but there's definitely a lot of interest from all the inspectors that hear about the app in general.
Yeah, and I would add that, as we have a non-point source team that's using kind of a similar app as I understand. So as these things kind of progress and we iron out how to fully implement this, meet all of the requirements that we need to meet for ecology, they already have a GIS developer position to focus on this sort of thing. I don't know that it's for the industrial permit, but I think that it's definitely soon to come. And again, depending on your agency, you can really do this on your own. We were fortunate to have our previous supervisor start this work and really, build the app, but truly anybody can kind of build a survey with Survey123. And especially if you have a really helpful GIS and IT team, which we're fortunate to have.
One more question. Does the platform allow for tracking of contractors or developers that routinely need more help in implementing BMPs?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the big things about it. It's still relatively new, so we don't have a huge database of information, but that is something we're tracking. So every inspection, the permittee is recorded. We typically write down the earthworks contractor because that's typically the contractor who is in charge of actually implementing BMPs on site. So that's definitely something that we can do with the data that we're collecting and storing in the Survey123 database.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Jess and Morgan, for addressing this topic. If anyone has additional questions, please contact the presenters. Their contact information is on the screen, and it can also be found in the Municon program.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.